guys, welcome back to Binge Watch Britney. So for today's episode, I am going to be covering Outer Banks Season 4. So I have to start by saying that I really hate how they split the season into two parts. I don't know why Netflix started doing this, but it's super annoying because obviously it breaks up the season. You may be into the first part of the season and then may not want to watch the second part of the season. And so I just feel like it's just so much easier if they just release everything all at one time. Because as someone who likes to binge watch, and I can binge watch several episodes, I think they broke it up into maybe 4 and 5 or 5 and 5 or something like that. But literally I would watch all 10 episodes in one sitting. So I really wish that they would just stick to that model of releasing the whole season at once. Because what drives me nuts about regular TV is that you have to get one episode a week, and that can take 12 weeks or something like that, depending on how many episodes there are. So I just really hate that model, and I hope that they do change that in the future. However, what I will say about part 2 is that I really liked it because it seemed like a movie. The trailer for it was really, really good, and I was like, wow, this looks like this could actually be a movie instead of a Netflix TV series, and so I knew I was really excited for part 2 when it came out. But ironically, I forgot that it was coming out on the 7th, so I didn't watch it the day that it came out. So I ended up watching it on November 9th. And I binge watched the remaining episodes, and it was so good. The only annoying thing was that there was some audio issues after the first 2 episodes, so I had to switch to English audio description, and that just completely ruined the vibe. I watched one full episode like that, and I refused to watch the rest of the season like that, so I switched from my laptop to my Fire tablet, and that was a much better experience, so I do hope that they fix those audio issues. And then additionally, I know that there's some drama with the cast, but I don't really know the specifics, but I do just want to bring that up because I did read somewhere where they were saying like there's some friction, I guess, between the guy who plays JJ and maybe the girl who plays Kia or something like that, and maybe he's leaving the show, and so that's why this season was done the way it was. I'm not really too sure, but I just wanted to call that out. So, with all of that being said, let's go ahead and get into the rest of the episode. Alrighty, so we're at our 5 key points. The first point, the Pogues are hired to find a amulet. I believe it's an amulet that they're trying to find. What we know at this point is that the Pogues just got, I think, $1 million because they discovered the gold that Ward Cameron was kind of chasing after them for and all of that stuff, so they were able to get paid for making that discovery. And what ended up happening was that they ended up squandering $700K of it to buy back JJ's family property, but that property was only worth $80K, which is extremely ridiculous. So the gang was all mad at him because he just kept that bidding war with that guy that he was bidding back and forth with. He just kept going up and up, and at that point they knew that what he was doing was ridiculous, but they didn't really try that hard to stop him, and so they ended up overspending on the property that wasn't even worth that much, and then they had very little left over to kind of like restore the property, so they really had to use scraps from other parts of the property in order to restore the house. And they also ended up building a store where you can just stop there to get stuff for your boats, for baiting, for fishing, all of that stuff. And so they ended up having a slow start, but they did get some people going to the property. Obviously everyone who lived in that area kind of knew who they were and kind of what they were all about, and so they wanted to support them, but they also kind of understood that, you know, these are just kids doing this is not going to last, that sort of thing. Anyway, so then we have the Pogues at some point. They're being threatened with zoning changes, and this is really coming from the Kooks because they just don't like what the Pogues are able to do. They just want to make life difficult for them, and so I think Topper is able to, with Rafe's kind of like nudging or whatever, he's able to talk to like his parents, his grandfather, whatever, and they really want to just basically buy the property back from the Pogue and turn it into something that will be used completely differently from how the Pogues are using it. And so the Pogues know that they need to be able to defend themselves when this zoning thing comes up. They also know that they have to set money aside for property taxes. And I think they saved one of the gold nuggets or something like that. And they have like maybe 20K left that is meant for the property taxes. And so JJ ends up losing that because he wants to bet all of their money on this beach race. And first of all, he's racing with a bike that is not even up to the race. And he is able to find this like daring shortcut to get ahead of the pack, but I think it requires him to jump over like this huge gap or whatever in the beach. I don't know if it was like a boardwalk or something like that, but he jumped over and was able to get ahead of the pack. But then I think something happened with his bike or he got knocked out. I can't remember. And then he had John B in the race with him as his backup in case, he didn't win. Maybe John B could win. So neither one of them won, and then they lost that money. And then later on, we have the Kooks and the Pogues really getting at it. They both were at the beach at the same time. We know that Key is really big on nature and the environment, and I think there was a hatching season for turtles, and this stupid girl, Ruthie, she just didn't like that the Pogues were like even challenging them, and so she basically goaded and manipulated Topper into getting into the car with her, and then she was basically driving right at JJ and Key and trying to intimidate them and scare them. And Key was concerned about the turtles. She was ignoring her, didn't really understand what she was saying. And then Key ends up confronting them and saying, hey, these were turtles. You just killed them for no reason and all of that stuff. And so Ruthie doesn't care, doesn't get it. They don't really feel bad. And what ends up happening is that JJ threatens to kill them all. They, of course, get a recording of it, and they're just blowing it up and making it seem like they're the innocent party and they were just threatened for no reason when they completely created that situation and the outcome of it. Next, what we have happening is the Pogues end up taking on a job for someone who lives at Goat Island. This is Wes Jenrette and his son-in-law, Chandler Groff, and this whole thing is connected to Blackbeard's treasure, which is, I guess, a lore on the island, so everyone kind of knows the story. And so the Jenrettes are plagued with curses, and Wes Jenrette, his daughter, Larissa, and his baby grandson, they ended up drowning. And so he believes that his family is haunted because of everything with Blackbeard, and that is why Larissa died. And we also have kind of a lot of stuff happening with the Pogues, and they're also getting visited by this outsider who's clearly not from the island, who's kind of like intimidating them and asking weird questions. He ends up showing up to the store, and he took something and he didn't pay for it, and so they just get a weird vibe from him. And so what ends up happening is that the Pogues, they're kind of forced to take this job from Wes Jenrette because they're low on money, they need income, they would obviously get paid well for doing this, and so they are willing to go on this adventure. And so what happens is they are able to talk to somebody that they know in the military who has the coordinates for where Blackbeard's ship went down. And so they're able to talk someone into getting them the coordinates. They have to show up at that location at a specific time. And the reason why they have to do that is so that they're not detected by the military who is operating in that area. And so they go at night, they have their swimming gear, they have their oxygen tanks, JJ and Key. They end up going into the water, they are in the boat, they're looking for whatever they need to find, and then they get attacked by that guy who showed up at their store. I think his name is Lightner, and he shows up, he's attacking them. I think he takes what they were going after, and if he didn't take it, I think JJ got to it first, but they were just trapped, and he took Key's oxygen tank from her. So her and JJ have to split their oxygen in order to get back up to the surface, and then once Lightner gets back to the surface, he tells his crew, hey, there's somebody else out here, and the Pogues who didn't go into the water, they're just hanging out on the boat waiting for them to come up, not really realizing what's going on, but they do see that there's another boat in the area. They just don't know how bad the situation got down below. And so anyway, when JJ and Key come back up to the surface, they are having some type of condition where I think if you go below sea level or something like that too fast, it just changes something with your body that's not good, and so they're suffering from that, and so they end up having to go to the hospital, and they need to be put in these, I think, decompression chambers. I'm not sure, and they have to stay there for like 24 hours, I think. So it's just JJ and Key, and so they did end up injuring that guy, Leitner, when they were down below, and he ends up going to the same hospital because I think he damaged his hand or something like that, and he needs to be treated. But he ends up seeing JJ and Key in the chambers, and obviously that chamber's for a specific reason, and so he knows that it was them who he ran into when they were all down below. And then what happened is Leitner and his crew of mercenaries, they end up stealing from the Pogues. I think they were basically wanting to get whatever JJ and Key were able to get. And so we realized that they are working with Terrence, and Terrence is someone that we first met Cleo with. And so he seems like he's going to betray Cleo, but he's actually trying to help her. And basically they are just using him for his boat, I guess. And so Leitner is threatening Cleo, trying to figure out what she knows, because I think he showed up at where they live at the Maybank property, and he kidnapped Cleo, and so that's how she runs into Terrence, and then they make her take them to the house so that they can find what they're looking for. They can't find it. And I think Pope has it, and so they call Pope and tell him, hey, you have X amount of time to get here before we kill Cleo. And so he shows up, Pope shows up, but Terrence, I think, somehow tries to protect Cleo, and he ends up getting shot and he dies. And so now Cleo has this grudge with Leitner because he killed Terrence, who was like a father figure to her. Going on to my second point, so the Pogues travel to Charleston, and Pope and Sarah get locked underground. So we know that the Pogues are looking for something, and they specifically need to go to a church to find whatever it is that they're looking for. They're obviously good with clues, so they figure out what the clue is, where they need to go, that sort of thing. And so they're in this church, and they know that they need to kind of get to a certain area of the church. They just don't know where it is. And so they're able to figure it out, and there's kind of like this grate that they're able to live, and it basically takes them underneath the church where you can store like old stuff. It's not like a bunker, but it's kind of like that basically, and there's just all of this stuff down there. Pope and Sarah get down there first, but then they hear other people down there, and it's Leitner and his crew of mercenaries, and they're able to see what they're after because they just go straight to it. And I think they grab a scroll. Sarah's kind of able to get a look at it, and then Leitner and his crew just leave, but Pope and Sarah are trapped down there. And the reason why they're trapped down there is because I think they had to slide down something to get to the area where they were, and there were rats chasing after them or whatever, and so they closed the door, but the door locked. So the way they came in, they can't go out that way, so they have to go out the same way that Leitner and his crew went. But to get down to that area, Leitner and his crew, they had a key, and so when they came back up, they locked it, and so now Pope and Sarah can't get out that way. And so what ends up happening is that because they're all in the same place, Cleo sees Leitner, she wants to go after him because of Terrence, and so we do see them kind of getting in this fight, and then he's like strangling Cleo, and two guys who have nothing to do with anything, they see what's happening, they tell him to get off of her, and then they just kind of run away. And then John B wants to go after them, he grabs the gun and he aims it at them, but he doesn't shoot. And then you have him going back to Cleo in the cemetery where the mercenaries were able to get underground. They went through the cemetery, whereas Pope and Sarah went through the underground tunnel inside the church. And so anyway, Cleo and John B are able to hear Pope and Sarah, and where they are is basically like a stone coffin or whatever. And so they're like, oh, stone breaks stone, and so they knock over something that breaks into half, and it's basically weakening the stone that is keeping Pope and Sarah from being able to come out. And so from there, we have them hammering on the stone with like a sledgehammer or whatever, and they're able to get them out, and they're able to regroup and figure out the next steps. While all of this is going on, We know that Rafe is kind of on the outs with the Pogues because he thinks that they did something to his dad. He's against his sister. They've always been butting heads, and so he's just kind of making things a little bit more difficult for them on the island. And we have Rafe. I think he just started dating this girl, Sophia. She's a Pogue, and so he's talking to Topper. He has his girlfriend around. They're making fun of him for dating Sophia because she's a Pogue. She's not a kook like them. And so what ends up happening is that there's this talk about Goat Island and this investment deal. Rafe is approached to be a part of it, and initially Sophia tells him like, hey, it's not a good idea, but then she overhears Rafe talking bad about her to his friends, and this really upsets her, and so she ends up taking Hollis up on her deal. And the deal is that she needs to motivate or encourage Rafe to invest in the Goat Island project, and she gets him to do that. And then obviously she realizes like, hey, this is not a good thing, and she wants to talk him out of it, but she can't really say too much about why, and so it doesn't really get anywhere, and he wants to continue going through with the deal. And as a result of this, he ends up losing $400K. Going into my third point, JJ is actually a kook. So at some point, West turns up dead, and Shoop realizes that the kids are involved somehow. He realizes this because I think when the cops are basically called to Goat Island, the kids, I guess they're going to check in with West to see if they can get more information or an update, I don't know, but they are going to Goat Island, and then they realize that the cops are there, and they find out that West is dead, and so Shoop is just trying to realize how they are connected to all of this. They get questioned, and they're kind of like not sharing a whole lot of information about why West hired them and all of that stuff. And so what happens is later on, JJ gets a letter that West wrote to him, and this was delivered by one of the groundskeeper that they met when they first traveled to Goat Island. And so JJ ends up reading the letter, and he ends up going to this guy, Mike, to find out where his dad is, because obviously he wants to ask him about what's in the letter. And so then he finds out that his dad has basically been hiding out on the island in between jobs. So his dad has had a chance to see him, but he hasn't, and so JJ's been left fending for himself and on his own when his dad's been really not that far away this whole time, and so obviously that's really frustrating for him. Then we have the cops showing up to Mike's house because I guess they were looking for JJ, and Luke's there, so this is bad. So now Luke and JJ have to go on the run, and they end up going to this light tower, and Luke is finally telling JJ the truth, that he works for the Genrest and that Larissa is his real mom, but Luke himself is not JJ's real dad, and so JJ realizes that he's a Genret and a Groff, which means he's a kook. He comes from money. JJ refuses to believe all of this, or he kind of believes it, but then he's also just mad at Luke for mistreating him his whole life and being lied to and all of that stuff. JJ refuses to hear anymore, and he runs away, and what we later realize is what Luke is trying to tell him is that Luke basically got himself a deal to where he sold his property that the Pogues bought at the auction. He stole that property to the kooks so that they could turn it into something else, and as a result that would drop his charges or give him immunity basically. And so all of this is done after the fact, but because they're powerful people, they were able to make it look like this was done before the sale went through, and the sale shouldn't have gone through. So basically, long story short, they were able to invalidate the sale. The Pogues are going to get their money back, but they're basically taking away everything that the Pogues have worked for when they rebuilt the property on the Maybank property. So they are not really happy about that. JJ realizes that this is another knife in the back from Luke. He gets really upset, and they're at the city hall when all of this is happening. The whole town is there to attend this hearing and kind of protest for their side and all of that stuff and support the Pogues and vice versa. And so JJ gets up after John B. and Key speak, and he just stared at his dad, and then he throws a chair at the window. The cops try to attack him, and because there's so many Pogues there, basically a riot breaks out, and JJ ends up punching police officers. They try to arrest him. They get him in the car. Somebody breaks the back window of a car. He escapes, and so he's on the run, and And what was a really, 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 really great scene, we have JJ running to basically the downtown area of where they live, and it's just him there. All of the stores are locked up. It's kind of like dead. It's late at night and all of that stuff. He gets a bat and he's just trashing everything. He's breaking windows. He steals a ring. He's damaging so much property. But the way that that scene was carried out, the way it was filmed, the way he was talking, it made me think kind of the Joker a little bit. Like, this was like next level acting of him just going crazy, with him interacting with the camera and with him just letting loose on all of the property in that area, because obviously he has had so much taken away from him that he's given them a taste of their own medicine. He ends up going to the realtor who basically orchestrated this plan to steal his family's property. He ends up running by or past that realtor's office, and he goes in to trash it. Obviously, the cops are on the lookout for any reports of break-ins and all of that stuff, so they know that this is JJ at that property, and everyone just heads there. And then what happens from there is that JJ's destroying the property. He's surrounded. There's a whole mob outside as well, and Shoop is on the loudspeaker trying to get him to surrender. They're aiming guns at him, and then obviously everyone is worried about him getting his shot. And so what happens is he's like, I'm not backing down. I'm gonna keep fighting. You're gonna have to come in and get me. And so he's threatening the police. He's challenging them, basically. They start to make their way kind of towards the property. He ends up putting metal in the microwave and running the microwave, and so this causes like a little bit of explosion and sparks to go off and all of that stuff. And so as we see the cops making their way to go in the house, Pope ends up tackling an officer to prevent him from shooting JJ, whatever, even though the guy can't see JJ. And so Pope gets himself in trouble. And this is a huge thing because obviously Pope is black and he's attacking a police officer. So this can go wrong so many ways. He's not just going to be let off the hook, even though he is a Pope, so his family's not wealthy or anything like that. He doesn't have connections that will really help get him out of trouble. So this is the bad situation that Pope has put himself in. While all of this is going on, we do have JJ eventually getting away. While this is happening, the gang has lost track of JJ, and so we have them kind of regrouping, going home, and then they're kind of wandering downtown to kind of just see if they can find JJ. And we know that Sarah isn't really feeling well around this time, and so she ends up going to the pharmacy. She takes a pregnancy test and confirms that she's pregnant. He is looking for her and comes to the bathroom where she is and sees the pregnancy test, and they just talk back and forth about, the fact that she's pregnant, how is she going to handle it, and all of that stuff. And so obviously the implications that I get from the conversation is that even though she's scared, being pregnant and having a child, there's no talk of not wanting to have the baby. So I was really glad that they just celebrated the pregnancy news, but they didn't really get too deep into what the decision was going to be, if that makes sense. Backtracking to Pope. So he's in all of this trouble, and what he realizes is that he's either going to have to do jail time. He's already being put on house arrest. He's going to have to do jail time, or he is going to have to join the Marines in order to get his charges dropped or whatever. And so obviously this is a decision that Pope is really struggling with because he doesn't want to go to the Marines. And so next we have JJ going to Go Island. Obviously at this point he knows or has information that Groff is dead and that West Jenret is his grandfather. And so he ends up going to Go Island. They have a little conversation. Groff is basically denying that he is JJ's father. He's telling him, well, hey, if Luke is my father, I would want a different father as well, all of that sort of stuff. And so he's basically lying to JJ. While JJ is there, the mercenaries are attacking Go Island. They're looking for Groff. JJ doesn't really know why. We don't really know why either. And so they're able to get away, and they make their way to a boathouse. And we realize that this is the boat that Larissa was supposed to have been on when she drowned. JJ realizes that, hey, this is the name of the boat. Why is it still intact, whatever. And so obviously Groff is making up lies to kind of keep JJ believing the lies. And so JJ's trying to start the boat. They can't start it. He wants to jump in the water, and then Groff is like, oh, this is where Larissa died. I can't go in the water. JJ's like, well, I can. And he jumps in the water, and he's about to swim away. away. And this is when Groff admits to him, hey, I'm your father. JJ gets out of the water, which is a bad mistake because he ends up putting himself in a position to be captured by the mercenaries. So at this point, the mercenaries now have JJ and Groff. They take them back to their boat and they lock them up kind of like in the engine room, I guess. And so JJ is bonding with Groff in a sense, and they're kind of going over their similarity, how they're alike, and the things that they do that's very similar to each other. And so JJ calls out Groff and says, I can tell when you're lying, you speed up when you're lying. And so obviously we're seeing that they do a lot of things very similarly, and then they also obviously make very destructive decisions that impact the people around them. At this point, the Pogues are looking for JJ. Key knows that JJ is actually a general at Groff because he told her, but they kept it from the rest of the group. And so while they're trying to figure out where JJ is, they're like, hey, he might be at Goat Island. So they go to Goat Island, they see the boat, they see them kind of in a tense situation, and they're like, hey, let's throw a Molotov cocktail at them. John B is like winding up the thing, but he throws it straight up in the air and it lands on their own boat. And so that gets the people's attention. And they're like, hey, what's going on out there? Who are you? Identify yourself and all of that stuff. And so they end up slingshotting a Molotov cocktail to the boat. It lands and it causes a distraction so that JJ can get free. And so JJ stupidly runs back into the boat and goes kind of further down the boat, and I don't know why he's doing this because obviously he just needs to jump off the boat and his friends can rescue him. And so now John B has to go on the boat to find JJ. They run into trouble. I think they get the squall and then they are able to get outside of the boat, but they are trapped, and so they have to go to the very top of the boat, and then they end up jumping off the boat and they get in their own boat and then they leave. One thing I want to highlight about this scene is so we are really seeing how manipulative Groff is, because at first he lied to JJ, told him he wasn't his father, then told him he was his father, and then when we see the mercenaries threatening Groff, he tells the head lady or whatever her name is, he tells her, hey, the kid, he's the one who killed Omar. I know he killed Omar, he told me. And so we see him kind of really using JJ to his advantage and kind of putting him in position so that he can then make JJ look like he's the one doing something wrong. So we see this happening, and this is not a good thing. And so when the Pogues are speeding off in the boat, they're not being chased after, but we later see Groff kind of emerging out of the water, and he's walking back into the house on Goat Island. So now that the Pogues have the map, they are able to look at it more and get kind of an idea of where they possibly need to go. We do have Groff later showing up and kind of giving them more information about the map, how to read it, and all of that stuff. And so it seems like the Pogues and Groff are working together, but Groff is actually manipulating everything on the back end. He's manipulating JJ into thinking that he's trying to help. And so we see him take JJ to these different places. First, he makes JJ rob Larissa's crave to get a necklace that will help read the map. And so we really see Larissa's decomposed body, and that's a really awful thing for JJ to have to see. But he does notice that his mother has a gash on her forehead, which she wouldn't necessarily have if she just innocently drowned, right? Once they got the info from Larissa, West locked JJ in the whatever it was, and then he went back to Poglania and he stole the skull, was confronted by Key, attacked her, locked her in the freezer, and then went back to get JJ. And then he makes JJ drive him to the harbor, basically, and Groff gets out and he goes to Hollis's house, and he goes there to get the money that she would have gotten from Rafe. However, Hollis reveals that they read West and the property is not going to Groff like he told her, it's going to the state. And so now she realizes that he was using her to basically con money out of Rafe, and she doesn't want any part of it. And she confronts him with a gun, but he's able to distract her and manipulate her, and he ends up killing her. He wipes down everything so that his fingerprints aren't on anything, and then he takes the murder weapon and he places it in the Twinkie, which is the car that the Pogues drive. Then he takes Hollis's boat and he tells JJ to go start it up, and then from there what happens is JJ goes to start the boat and we see him planting evidence to make it look like JJ killed Hollis. right now we have Groff just really orchestrating everything to kind of take stuff from the Pogue to make them look bad, and he's doing all of this to get in favor with the missionaries, but he's obviously going to betray them too because we know that he is really not a good guy. Everything that he does is self-serving. So anyway, while JJ is starting up the boat, we, again, as I mentioned, we see Groff planting the gun in the Twinkie. They get on the boat together, and Groff is really trying to convince JJ to screw over his friends and just go hunt for the Blue Crown with him. JJ refuses, and this is what causes Groff to kind of show his manipulative side. This causes Groff to just drop his mask, and he's like, oh, you're tricking me like your mother. Why did you let me think that you're gonna work with me if you weren't, blah, blah, blah. And so he ends up attacking JJ and pushing him off the boat and leaving him stranded. John B., Sarah, Cleo, maybe Pope, but I'm not sure. They are able to go back to the Maybank property, and what happens is they're looking for Key. They find her in the freezer. She is looking for her phone, tries to call JJ, and then she's able to use Find My Phone or Find My Friends, whatever, and she is able to see that JJ's on the water. And so they get in their boat, go to that spot, they find JJ, and they are able to rescue him. At the same time that all of this is happening, we really have Rafe realizing that he was conned because he obviously heard about the reading of Wes Jenrett's will. He goes to the police station, and we see that this is where Shoop is also kind of going through the evidence, and he's realizing that something's off. And once he hears what Rafe is saying about Groff and Hollis, he realizes that there's a bigger picture here and that Groff is heavily involved, and he realizes that, now Rafe is saying that Hollis and Groff conned him out of money, and then he's also realizing that Groff said that Hollis was his alibi for the night that Wes Jenrett died, and that Wes Jenrett and another guy have similar injuries on their necks, so he knows that Groff is implicated in this way more than he initially thought. Going on to the fourth point, the gang travels to Morocco. So we know that Pope is on house arrest, and he's being told that he needs to join the Marines. He is literally in the Marines office with his dad and uncle. He has to go to the bathroom, and he's just really not wanting to join the Marines. And then we see him sprinting out of the building, so obviously he's going on the run, and he has an ankle monitor, and so this sets off his ankle monitor. So now everyone is looking for Pope. We know that Rafe wants revenge on Groff, and so we see that he is on the water, and there's some craziness that happens with the Pokes and the Kooks and all of this stuff. When JJ went on his adventure with the dad, we had John B. and Sarah going to City Hall to get married. It was closed, but they couldn't. At this point, John B. knows that Sarah is pregnant, and what happened was the Kooks showed up. They wanted to know where JJ was. They had weapons. They were threatening John B. and Sarah, and we see Sarah getting into it with Ruthie. Ruthie pushes Sarah. Obviously, she's pregnant, so this is not good. And then we have Cleo kind of coming to the rescue by putting a hole in their tire so they can't drive the car. They end up chasing them, and then the gang gets connected with Pope. Then they end up reuniting with JJ, and then, so now here we are, they're on the boat, and they, at this point, know that they need to go to Morocco, and so they are on a police boat, and everyone knows, hey, this is a police boat, why are these kids driving it? JJ's on the boat, they know that the cops are looking for JJ, so this draws even more attention to them, and we have Rafe, who is on the harbor, the pier as well, and he's in his boat, and he overhears them talking about Groff. He obviously wants to go after Groff. He gets the feeling that they know where he is and all of that stuff. And so what Rafe does is he ends up borrowing a fishing boat from his friend because they need a boat that can take them all the way to Morocco from North Carolina. And so he's able to trade in his expensive boat for that fishing boat, whatever. What I really like is that Rafe also proposes to Sophia before he leaves, and he tells her to move in. And this was a beautiful scene from Rafe because we see him really understanding that he is kind of different from everyone else. Sophia is really good to him. He doesn't know everything, but he thinks that he's done so much worse that nothing that she does or has done is as bad as what he has done, and so he proposes to her, wants her to know that she has a future with him, tells her to quit her job, tells her to move in, and she tries to tell him, like, hey, Hollis and I, we did something, blah, blah, blah. He doesn't want to hear it because, again, he thinks that he's done so much worse. What really annoyed me is that he told her, like, hey, I don't want to hear it, don't worry about it, and then obviously this blows up later on. But I was really glad that they had that moment, and I really thought that he was truly going to let it go. Even if we found out about it, I thought he was truly going to let it go. So anyway, we have this shootout on the harbor, and the gang ends up getting stranded somewhere further, kind of, I guess, on the marsh or whatever, because the cops were aiming the gun at them. Key's father tackled the cops so that he wouldn't hit any of the kids, and then JJ fired like a flare at them, so he's just adding more seriousness to the situation. And then we have them getting stranded somewhere because it's a boat that's kind of like on a floaty thing. I don't really know how to describe it, but they basically are running out of air, and then the boat's not going to go, and so they get stranded, and Sheep is able to find them. He is able to get to where they are, and he's basically trying to get JJ to come in and pope as well. And so here we have Rafe coming in, and he's like, I'm here to save all your A's or whatever. And then he's like, hey, Shoop, you think the Pogues did all of this stuff? No, it's Groff. And Groff killed Hollis, Groff killed Western Red, Groff stole money from me, Groff did all of this other stuff. And so Shoop is like, okay, yeah, you're right, this is what I'm thinking. Groff is more heavily involved than I initially thought in all of this stuff. And so Rafe is able to convince Shoop because he's saying, hey, your job's in jeopardy right now because things aren't looking good for you. Let us go. We'll go find Groff. We'll bring him back and you'll look like the good guy. And he also tells Shoop that he'll tell him about what happened on the tarmac because I believe Rafe shot his former boss or whatever. And so Shoop agrees to let them go so that they can go off and find Groff. So I want to make it clear that Rafe has absolutely saved the day. The group should be thanking him because, one, he got them a ride and he got them out of legal trouble. So anyway, the gang is making their way to Morocco to find Groff, and we have the gang trying to figure out what to do about Rafe, and you can kind of hear them talking about him. And what ends up happening is that JJ ends up punching him, and then when Rafe realizes that he is locked up and he has been tied up and he is basically put in a situation where he has no advantage at all. And so they leave him like this the whole trip, and he sees Sarah bringing him food. He's obviously going to have trouble eating it because of the way he's tied up and where she's leaving the food, and so obviously this is not a good situation for Rafe. And I was really upset that they did this to him because he keeps trying to restart over with them, and obviously he does have a grudge against them, but he keeps doing right by them, and then they just mess it up and screw it up and betray him, and it makes him even worse when he's genuinely trying to do the right thing. What we have happening later on is that the boat that they are on ends up capsizing because they go into a storm. We have Sarah falling into the water, and then JJ jumps in after her. JJ has been drunk this whole trip to Morocco. He didn't take the news well when John B told him that he and Sarah were pregnant, and so this is JJ's way to make amends because he's truly been insufferable on the trip. He was not helping them with anything really, he was just drunk the whole time. And so when he sees Sarah in the water in the middle of a storm, he throws the life raft to her, and then he just goes jumping into the water. And so obviously this is not good because the storm is crazy, it's dangerous, they shouldn't have survived that. And so they all end up washing up on the beach, but it is John B, Cleo, Rafe, and Key, I believe, and Pope. So Sarah and JJ have been separated from the group. They can't find them. And then they, at some point, I don't know how many days later, they do see Sarah and JJ walking towards them. They can't really tell who it is, but then they realize who it is, and they're just so happy to be reunited. So from here, because they no longer have a boat, the group ends up having to walk through the desert to get to the nearest city, and we see them rob a food stall, they steal clothes, and they're really just trying to get into the city, figure out where the mercenaries and Groff are. And because they stole from a food stall, they do have cops chasing after them. The cops initially detain Rafe, and Rafe was like, hey, it's not me. The guy is like, no, it's not him, and he is freed, and then he kind of gets separated from the group. Obviously, as they've been talking about the Blue Crown, he's kind of picking up on the details of what they're talking about, and obviously he's just there to get his 400k back, but he's also intrigued by this Blue Crown and this treasure hunt that the Pogues are on. And what we have happening is that we do see this moment just before they robbed a food stall where Sarah wasn't feeling well. She had to sit down, and so the group ends up stealing food from a food vendor. And what we realize is that because the group is so nasty to Rafe, he actually had money, and he could have given them money so that he could buy his sister some food so that she would feel better, being that she was pregnant and they were stranded and all of that stuff. And so I thought it was so funny that he had money on him the whole time and could have helped them, but because they were such jerks to him, he didn't even bother to offer that. And so obviously this is part of that frustration that I have with the Pokes, because they keep making things worse for themselves with how they are treating Rafe. And anyway, so at this point, we have Rafe off by himself. He's interested in the treasure hunt that the kids are on, and he ends up buying himself a phone so that he can call Sophia. And he's like, hey, you know, where's that pen that Groff gave me, blah, 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 because he saw this name on a t-shirt, and he realized that he saw that name somewhere. So he calls Sophia, asks her for the pen, and he's able to figure out what hotel Groff is staying in. And he ends up going to that hotel. He sees the mercenaries. Obviously, he doesn't really know who they are, but he is able to confirm that Groff is there or whatever. And so he goes outside of the hotel, and he's trying to find a way kind of inside or up into the hotel without making it obvious what he's after, you know what I mean? And so he ends up scaling the building. He gets to the top, and we see that Groff and Lightner are fighting, and Rafe is able to attack Lightner. He says to Groff, hey, do you want me or him? Basically saying, do you want this guy to continue beating you up, or do you want to deal with me and give me my money back or whatever? And they get Groff's things out of the room, they get on the motorcycle, and they drive off to this well. And what happens at this well is pretty interesting. So we have Groff showing Rafe the map and like how to read it and all this stuff. He doesn't show him how to read it, but he shows him like what he needs to do in order to read it. But Rafe still doesn't really fully understand everything that Groff is telling him. And so what we have happening is that we know that Groff is manipulative, and what ends up happening is he kind of positions himself behind Rafe while he's looking at the map through the lens, and we see that he has a knife in his hand, and he basically taunting Rafe and saying, hey, you know, we paid your girlfriend to make you take this deal. Your girlfriend's the reason why you lost $400K. And this actually upsets Rafe because he didn't realize that this is what Sophia was trying to tell him. And he's so angry about this because everyone has literally betrayed him. And so he does not take this well at all. And he stands up to try to like fight Groff. And he sees Groff coming at him. He kind of moves out of the way. And then we see this hilarious scene where Groff ends up kind of getting turned around, and he's trying to keep his balance because he doesn't want to fall into the well. It's almost like time stops and it's dead silent, and then you kind of see them straightening up and really trying to just stay still, and then you see Rafe take like a gentle nudge and just send Groff toppling into the well. And that was so funny because right after that, we see Rafe going, checkmate, B! And it was so funny because Groff really deserved that because he was so annoying and so manipulative, and he really thought that he was going to be able to goad Rafe into a fight, and it ended up backfiring on him, and now he's stuck in this well, and he literally, it doesn't seem like he's going to be able to get out of that situation that he is now in. Then what we have happening is that the Pogues are trying to get into the boat because they recognize Terrence's boat in the harbor, and then they try to get onto the boat, John B. and Sarah, to see what they can find out about the map. We have Key trying to distract the guy who's heading to the boat. Then we have JJ coming and kind of whacking the gun out of the guy's hand and injuring him. Then we have them stealing a truck and trying to drive away to where they need to go next in order to get the Blue Crown. And the Pogues actually end up at that same well where Groff and Rafe just were, and they hear Groff yelling. They don't know who it is. JJ sees this duffel bag. He goes to it. He realizes whose bag it is, and so we see JJ have this scene where he's able to confront Groff from a position of advantage. He confronts Groff for using him, for taking advantage of him, and not really caring about him. And we see that Groff is literally trying to twist the situation and manipulate it so that JJ will help him, and JJ is hip to everything that he's saying and everything that he's doing, and he knows that this is just another trick from Groff. And so we see him throw down this little thing of water, rather this big thing with a little bit of water in it, and then he says, good luck, Groff, you're on your own. And so we see that Groff is really upset by this. He does not like that he couldn't manipulate JJ into helping him, and he vows to get revenge on JJ. And the group just leaves him there, and they go off to find the Blue Crown. going into my fifth point, JJ gets the blue crown but dies. So at this point, everyone is heading to Agripenta. This is where the blue crown is supposed to be. We know that Rafe kind of has the head start. He gets there first, but he doesn't really know where to go. He doesn't know how to read the map to figure out where he needs to go. And so we see him kind of looking at the map, trying to figure things out. We know about the mercenaries are heading there as well, and then we know about the pogues are heading there as well. So Rafe ends up being confronted by the mercenaries. We see the pogues kind of creeping up on the scene in the background. They see that Rafe is at a disadvantage, and this is a scene that really annoyed me because we see that Rafe is kind of powerless in the situation. He can literally be killed, and we see the pogues having this discussion about whether or not to let the mercenaries kill Rafe, and I'm really glad to see that Sarah had her humanity in this moment because she's listening to what they're saying and she's like, but this is my brother, what the F are you talking about? And so we know that at this point JJ has the gun that he took off for the guy back at the harbor, and so she just takes the gun from JJ, she aims it at the mercenary's truck, and she sets off and explodes, and she's like, hey, this is my brother, nobody's killing him. And so this allows Rafe to get away, but now the mercenaries know where the pogues are, so everyone is just kind of running to get into the city and kind of trying to get away from the bad guys, but then also try to find the treasure. And so Rafe is able to get to this door that he can close. It's kind of like a gate to keep them in. He's trying to close it on the pogues, and they're like, no, what are you doing? We just saved your life, blah, blah, blah. And so all of the pogues get in, they close the gate, and they keep running through and kind of trying to get further and further away from the mercenaries. What happened is the pogues eventually catch up to Rafe, and we see them begging him from the map, like, hey, we know how to read it, you don't. And he's like, no, I took it from you guys. It was yours. I took it from you guys. In fact, I paid $400K for this. And he's like, I don't trust you. I don't trust any of you. And this is what they said to him on the boat. And so he's throwing their words to him in their face. And this is where we see that heart-to-heart between Rafe and Sarah. And so Rafe is confronting her about what happened to their father. He believes that they killed him or whatever. And so she comes out and she tells him, hey, Dad died protecting me. And this is something that Rafe never really wanted to hear the full story on. He just made assumptions because he knew that they had a lot of beef with his father, so he just assumed that they did something to the dad and that Sarah was okay with it. And so Sarah had to tell him, no, Dad died trying to save me. He took bullets for me. I tried to tell you this, but you wouldn't listen. Then she's like, you're my only family. We have to work together, blah, blah, blah. And so we see him having this moment of realization. He's understanding what Sarah's saying to him. And so he does agree to turn over the map so that they can work together. But obviously he wants to make sure that he gets his cut because he's $400K in the hole. If they get money from this, obviously he'll be paid back even more money than what he lost. And so he's like, if we work together, I still get my cut, right? And so he's willing to hand over the map. And in what was the most perfect scene of this scene, we see Sarah briefly touch the map, and then she just goes in and she hugs her brother. And I'm really glad that they had that moment because Rafe has obviously been betrayed by so many people, and I was so upset that people keep doing him wrong even when he's trying to do the right thing. And so I'm really glad that Sarah recognized the humanity in her brother, wanted to save his life because that is her brother, and then she showed him so much compassion when she hugged him because obviously Rafe is dealing with how the pogues treated him on the way to Morocco with locking him up and willing to let him drown when the boat capsized, and then also with him learning what Sophia had done to him, because we did see him call her and confront her, and he kicked her out of their house after just inviting her to move in with him. And so we see that he is in this state where he does not trust anyone, and I'm really glad to see this moment where Sarah shows her brother compassion. What happens from here is the pogues end up splitting up, so we have John B., Sarah, and Rafe kind of working their way to the crown. We have JJ and Key, I believe, going one way, and then we have Pope and Cleo going another way. And basically what they're doing is distracting the mercenaries and kind of picking them off so that they have a better chance at survival. What really annoyed me is we have this one scene where Cleo and Pope kind of volunteer to stay behind and slow down the mercenaries. JJ fell and he was injured and he has the gun and there's 3 bullets or something like that left. And so Pope was like, let me save you, blah, 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 because prior to this, JJ is really upset that Pope risked his future to help JJ, and so now Pope is saying, hey, let me rescue you again, whatever. And so JJ agrees to let them have the gun so that they can hold off the mercenaries. And Pope really annoyed me because he's like, oh, you're not the only one who shot teddy bears, right? And so he has this chance as the mercenaries are breaking down the door. He's just waiting for his perfect moment to kill one of them so that there's less people for them to fight off. And instead of taking the shot, he intentionally misfires and he wastes the bullet. And I'm so mad at him because obviously the group is going to pay for that later, that he wasted the bullet and didn't take advantage of that opportunity that they had to even the playing field. So he misfires. Now him and Cleo are being chased, and we kind of have the mercenaries working their way closer and closer to where the group is. And so we do see this moment where I think Pope and Cleo, they're on top of this building, they're throwing bricks down at the mercenaries. They hit one of them. They're still trying to advance. Then we see JJ and Key. They end up taking out another mercenary by shoving a wall of bricks on top of him. He's down. And then what we see is Cleo ends up being shot by Lightner, and she's slowing down. She can't run as fast. They still have a gun. She wants revenge on Lightner for killing Terrence. She's like, hey, Pope, just go. Don't worry about me. I'll survive, whatever. So obviously, she's willing to sacrifice herself because she wants to take out Lightner. And then obviously, her sacrifice will buy the group some time. And so Cleo's like, no, I got you. You're not going to do this on your own. And so he lines up the shot to shoot Lightner, who is taunting them because he's getting closer and closer to where they are because Cleo has slowed them down. And so he's able to take the shot and kill Lightner. Then from here, what happens is that we have John B, Rafe, and Sarah continuing to go up in the little stand building that they're in or whatever it is to get closer to where they believe the Blue Crown is. And so we see them with the map open. We know that they've taken photographs from Terrence's ship when they were on it not too long ago when they were at the harbor. And we see them trying to figure out where they need to go. And they're trying to figure out this clue, and John B ends up holding the map, and they see the shape, and then they realize that the shape on the map is the shape of the statue behind them, and so they realize that they need to climb up to that statue in order to get to the Blue Crown. Then what happens is I think JJ and Key reunite with John B, Sarah, and Rafe. At this point, a sandstorm is coming in, so that means it's going to be a lot of sand everywhere. They're not going to be able to see. They might be knocked around and all of this stuff, and so John B agrees to get Sarah down somewhere to safety because obviously she's pregnant, they want to survive, blah, blah, blah. So then it's just Rafe, JJ, and Key, and Rafe is like, hey, I'll do it, I'll go climb to get the Blue Crown, whatever. JJ doesn't want to leave it all up to Rafe, so they go with him, and then what happens is Rafe realizes that he's not able to climb up the statue because of an injury to his hand, and so JJ is the one that has to climb. And so JJ is climbing the statue in the middle of a sandstorm. They have people chasing after them. And so what we see is that obviously the mercenaries are getting closer to them. And, JJ is climbing up the statue. Key's kind of like yelling out to him, like, hey, hurry up, be careful, all of this stuff, right? And she's kind of telling everybody where they are. So even if they can't see you, they can hear your voice and kind of figure out where you are. So that annoyed me. But then Rafe is like, oh, I'll go and distract them. And she's like, no, what? You can't do that. It's not safe for you. They're killers. And it was so funny because he's like, I'm a killer too, right? And he's like pointing to his head and stuff like that. And he's saying, basically, he's gonna embrace his psychotic side and go after the mercenaries and make them regret chasing after them and trying to hurt them. And so we see him taking down, I think, 2 of the mercenaries, and then I don't know what happens to him after he does that, but we do see he continuing to talk to JJ and kind of encourage him to be careful and all of that stuff. He eventually gets to Blue Crown. We see the woman lining up the shot because she can see him in between periods of not being able to see and then being able to see. So she knows where JJ is, and so she's like, okay, I'll wait for you to get the crown and bring it to me, and then I'm obviously going to kill you and take it from you. And so we see that JJ does get the crown. He is able to make his way down with it. He reunites with Key. Then what we see is that he and Key are making their way down. They get separated, and we, at this point, what we need to know is that Groff, because he has a knife, he was able to climb out of the well and hitch a ride to Agripenta. So now Roth is back in play. He can create havoc for the group. And so what ends up happening is that because JJ and Key got separated, Groff is able to grab Key and he holds her at knife point. JJ quickly reunites with Key, but then he realizes the situation that they're in. Groff has Key at knife point, and so what happens from here is JJ basically tells Groff, I have everything I want. You can have the blue crown. Just give me Key. So he gives Groff the blue crown. He lets Key go, and then we see JJ and Key hugging and embracing because obviously they were just in a scary situation. We see Groff with the crown, and he looks sad, he looks regretful, and we see him call to JJ. JJ turns and faces him, and I genuinely thought that Groff is probably going to give the crown back to him, and some twisted sense of remorse and feeling bad for everything that he's done to JJ, whatever, or wanting to split the prize with him, whatever. But what happens is Groff ends up stabbing JJ, and this is ultimately what kills JJ, and then Groff runs off and he flees with the blue crown. So we do see JJ collapse to the ground. Key is kind of not really sure what to do. There's so much blood. He really can't be saved at this point, and so we know that John B. and Sarah are kind of hiding out in somebody's house, basically a little nursery. We know that Pope and Cleo were defending themselves against Leitner, and then what we have is everyone kind of gravitating into that spot of where JJ and Key are. Rafe is the last one to come in, and we see that they're all realizing that JJ is critically injured and that he has died. And so this is a really somber moment because I was not expecting JJ to die at all, and this kind of goes back to what I was saying at the beginning of the show, of there being friction with the cast, and I guess JJ's character, or JJ's actor, was leaving the show, and so this is how they were killing him off so that he would no longer be on the show. And so obviously this was a really somber moment for the group, and we see this montage of all of JJ's best moments with the Pogues and all of that, and so it really hits home that JJ is no longer going to be a part of this group. And what's really sad is because we did have that moment where John B. was able to tell JJ, hey, I'm gonna be a dad, I want you to be the godfather. JJ didn't handle it right, but then he made amends when he saved Sarah, and so obviously this is gonna hit John B. the hardest because he's losing his best friend, he's losing a brother. Then, to wrap out the season, what we have is the group, they bury JJ somewhere, and then we see them kind of sitting around a fire, and Rafe is telling them, like, hey, we know where Groff is going, we need to go to Lisbon, I think is what he said, and then Pope is like, oh, shut up, Rafe, like, you don't know what you're talking about. And again, I really hate them because they're always talking down on Rafe, when Rafe actually gets a lot of stuff done. Like, the group is trying to figure out how to get on the boat. Rafe, who has the least information about what's going on with the treasure, he was able to put clues together and quickly figure out where Groff was, and he was able to find Groff, and then while they all met up with different pieces of the puzzle, he was very instrumental in them being able to do all that they were able to do just because he knows how to get things done. He's resourceful, and he's definitely committed to seeing things through and getting what he wants. And so I think that they need to give Rafe a lot more respect than they do give him, because he's right about a lot of the things that he's saying, and he's right. They do need to go after Groff. They do need to get back to the Blue Crown. They do need to make him pay for what he did to JJ, because there's no way that this series can end with Groff getting the Blue Crown and just walking away after he screwed over so many people. And I was very happy to see that the group realized, Rafe is right. JJ would not stand for this. If this was any one of us who had died, JJ would be going after them. He would get even. He would want revenge. And so we see the season ending with Key affirming that she does in fact want revenge for what was done to JJ. And that is where the season ends. Alrighty, so to wrap up this episode, I really cannot believe that season 5 is going to be the last season of this series. I actually really like this series. I did start watching Stranger Things, and obviously it's about a group of friends who are basically treasure hunting, defeating the bad guys, so very similar setups and dynamics, but I really, really love Outer Banks, and I'm so sad that we're not going to get more seasons of this. I really wish that they didn't kill off JJ, because I feel like they would be able to keep it kind of like the same type of show that it is now, but they just have different adventures. But this JJ dying is going to dramatically change the show. So I'm not sure how long we have to wait for season 5, but I really am excited to watch it. I don't know if it's gonna be 6 months, is it gonna be a year? I have no idea what their filming schedule is, but I know that I'm super looking forward to season 5. I did see on Reddit that Rafe is supposed to get more screen time in season 5, which I think is well deserved at this point. Everyone obviously talked about how good looking Rafe is. They talk about how psychotic he is, but they also talk about how good of an actor the guy who plays Rafe is, and like he just elevates the acting. He captures all of the scenes that he's in, and I do agree with that because this was my favorite season of Rafe, and I obviously think that he deserves more recognition from the Pogues, and he deserves more screen time because again he gets stuff done and he doesn't even have all of the information. He's just able to just get stuff done and figure out what needs to be done and just do it. And so I really think that he would be an asset to the Pogues, and they just need to welcome him into their group more. They need to let the past go. Whatever happened before, it doesn't matter. You guys have an agenda now going to season 5. You guys need to work together and stop screwing each other over and just be more appreciative of each other, especially with you guys losing JJ. So I really hope that they find a better way to integrate Rafe into the Pogues, and if the show were to continue past season 5, Rafe would be an instrumental part of the group and the series. Obviously, we have no idea what's going to happen. It could be rebooted. It could get picked up by another network. We have no idea. I don't know. But I do know that in season 5, Rafe needs more screen time for sure. I've also been seeing that people are saying that Rafe and Key might get together. I can kind of see that happening, but I don't know how that's going to happen with JJ just passing. What's the time frame? So I do think it would be cool if they got together. Obviously, I do want him to work stuff out with Sophia because I really hate how he's like, don't worry about whatever you did. I don't care. I don't want to know. And then now that he knows, he's really upset about it. And so I really wish he just stood by what he said to her initially. Obviously, get through your pain and your frustration and the betrayal that you feel. But I really think that he should stick to what he told her when he proposed to her, because again he's done a lot worse. Not that everyone gets to betray him and he just needs to get over it, but she was trying to tell him and he didn't let her. So I think that is on him, that they didn't get to have that conversation under different circumstances. But also he was fighting for his life in Morocco, so I totally get where he's coming from with that as well. And one other thing, obviously, we know that Sarah announced that she was pregnant in this season, and so I have no idea how they're going to cover that in season 5. Obviously, having a baby and all of this treasure hunting and these dangerous situations that they're in is not good for someone who's pregnant. And so I'm just really curious how they're going to wrap up that storyline in season 5. And so yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to cover in this wrap up section. So, but again, season 4 was really well done. I really liked everything that happened. If I could have binge watched all 10 episodes, I would have. In one sitting, I would have for sure. And so I'm really looking forward to season 5, and I hope that you guys enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you in the next one.